Hey everyone, welcome back. For those of you who've been following AI Unleashed, where we have conversations with a wide variety of leaders in different segments of the industry. Yousaf and I have been friends for a while and we enjoy having a chat, and we're just recording these as kind of a weekly rant. So yes, I'm calling this the weekly rant, and that's exactly what it's called on Spotify. So go and check it out. And what we're doing is we're reviewing basically the things that we're seeing, the things that we're doing, because we're both in the AI space, we're both doing sort of development of things. So we're reviewing what we're seeing in the news, but also what we're doing. And this week is an interesting one because not only has my newsfeed been dominated by stuff that frankly is nothing to do with AI, politics, Nigel Farage versus Count Binface, and the travesty that is Anthony Starr not getting nominated for an Emmy for his portrayal of Homelander in The Boys. It's both of those things have been dominating my newsfeed way more than AI. So, we can focus on the important things, or we can talk about AI. Let's talk about AI for a second. So, Yousaf, would you like to reintroduce yourself to everybody, and then let's crack on and talk about what we're doing?
Yeah, thank you for probably the 6 people that are going to return after last week. So thank you for returning to episode 2 of Bald, Brown, Bearded Guys Rant About AI. That's what I'm calling it anyway. And obviously you can tell, guys, who is the adult here and who is the child. But yeah, no, loving the format, loving the conversations, and hopefully people find something valuable in this, even if just to giggle.
Laughter is important. Right, so let's proceed. I've got multiple screens, so I'll look at them as we go. So the first thing is, there've been a couple of reports in the L&D space. Let's start with L&D and move into everything else. So learning and development, the impetus and the noble cause of education for not only the workforce, but for the masses, is a hot topic for everybody. We're always talking about skills and things like that. So in the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of reports. So we've had one from Josh Burson, and we've had one from Talent LMS, and broadly they've been talking about the nature of upskilling as it's perceived by learning and development departments is slightly different to the nature of upskilling that's probably needed for the agentic revolution. I, of course, have opinions on that because we both operate in this field. So, Yousaf, do you want to go first? Do you want to give an opinion on what the gap is for L&D departments?
Yeah, it's a funny one, right? Without diving into long rants that this could very easily turn into. We're seeing the same things we've seen for many, many years on every other topic outside of AI, but now coming back into this. I mean, just this week, a client that I'm working with posed a new challenge or problem that they need to try and fix with their HR and L&D hats on, which was they took all of their senior leaders across this global organization, put them on a Stanford AI for Executives program for 4 weeks. All of the leaders returned after 4 weeks with some shiny certificates and some large marketing vague language around what those leaders could now do and what they were equipped with. But nothing changed. So then they brought in a specialist local consultancy to come and speak to leaders for 2 days about things like governance, hybrid organization structures, how decisions should change, how you go from a prompt first organization to an agentic organization. But again, nothing really changed. That conversation's come back round to me. And to me, it feels like a fairly obvious thing, right? We can't just speak to leaders, and it doesn't really matter even about the seniority of people in the business, but simply speaking to them and talking to them about AI and theoretical things and change that they need to look out for isn't the same as actually getting them hands-on and building and doing real things with it. It's my assumption and my bet that anyone in an organization, especially even a leader, for them to just spend 10 hours, 20 hours building something, it's not about the quality of what goes into building the thing, but it's about how are they approaching that build? Do they know what needs to go into it? Where do they find the dependencies? Where do they find the answers to the questions that they need answering before they can actually build something real? And then can they actually simulate deploying this in a real world type scenario? They're going to learn far more in that condensed 10 to 20 hours of being hands-on and actually trying to do something with the technology rather than just listening or reading about it. And I think we're still in this trap, and I don't know why. I'm still hearing and seeing people delivering AI training using PowerPoint slides, which just makes no sense to me. I'm still seeing these large programs of AI 101 and the history of LLMs and machine learning and neural networks and those kind of things. But none of that stuff actually really matters day to day. That's not the stuff that's going to drive and move people forward. So where do we go from here, Ash?
2 or 3 problems in the space. So problem one is L&D departments, generally speaking, are incentivized to do things that are not necessarily going to move the needles. Bring in a content library, spend a lot of money on big name courses, especially for leaders, because the incentive is we want our leaders to have a certificate from Stanford, and not that we want them to be able to do anything that's meaningful, tangible, or actionable in the organization. They're 2 different things. And as long as departments, organizations, etc., focus on the shiny thing rather than efficacy, efficiency, and outcomes, then we're going to get these kinds of problems. We've known this for 5 years, 6 years through meta-analysis, but also probably 40 years ever since David Cole put his book out in 1984, that experiential learning gives a better outcome, up to half a standard deviation from the mean, better outcome in terms of learning. So can you go and do a thing rather than can you be taught that? Of course, these are very different pedagogic approaches. So we know this. Do learning departments know this? Generally speaking, I've been around for a while in the industry, and I think learning departments broadly are not as conversant with the literature in their field as they should be. So that's point 1 and 2, shiny thing and understanding the literature. I've done a couple of programs over the last year with clients where, there's a little bit of teaching, but broadly it's a screen sharing, hands-on tools. You're going to build something. And pretty much everybody comes away with the capability to build something and the capability to deploy in their environment, which means making the necessary changes in governance and human skills and what people do versus what machines do, and et cetera, the things that you would expect. So I see that being an approach, 3 factors that we should consider. There's a sort of phantom 4th factor in this, though, and that is that maybe 10 years ago, I was looking into the factors that lead to acceptance, rejections, and continuance behaviors when it comes to technology. And one of the things I was looking at there was the concept of general versus specific literacy. Now, general literacy is, of course, easier because when you are an L&D team and you're incentivized to purchase content libraries that are generic or generic courses, university placements, etc., by definition, you're boosting general literacy, but you're not boosting specific literacy. And specific literacy, data, digital, AI, is going to be around the context of your organization, the processes that you need to improve, the automations you can put into place, the agent structures that might be helpful for your specific problem sets in the context of your organization with your data and with the software tools that you use. Can you really expect an L&D team to go and buy that from the market? No. It requires a significant investment of intellectual capital and financial capital to make that happen. And I think that's why there's a gap.
What do you think is the reason for that constraint? Lack of ability to do it in that way? Like, is it just we've always done it this way? Is it rethinking the model? Is it that there's a lack of skill or knowledge or expertise in even finding the right domain experts that can help them do these things?
It's all of the above. This is difficult stuff. It's not easy to go into. Think of all the factors I've just said. You have to understand your business, the context, the competitive environment, the processes that you use, the tech environment that you have at play in your organization, the constraints in terms of governance, the risk appetite, and you have to understand the outcomes, the tasks, the value chain, and the thing that's actually going to move the needle in terms of your problem. But that's not an L&D department's remit to solve. So no matter how much we, wring our hands and talk about performance consulting, that's a difficult problem that needs sustained intellectual input. And this is the kind of thing I do for a living and you do for a living. So to some degree, this is why I can talk eloquently about this kind of approach. But it's difficult. And we're living in a world where most people want to do the easy thing. We just want to ask a question, push a button and get an answer. So I think it's an artifact of those couple of things. What do you think?
I agree, but I also think people aren't asking the right questions or categorizing it in the right way either. So there was something I saw on LinkedIn this week, and it was a bit of a review or a playback from the Cannes and Lions Festival in France. And there was a panel there all around. And again, this had experts and leaders from all of the biggest AI labs and CMOs from those companies as well. And there's a gentleman very popular who was on stage and said something which sounds cool until you actually think about the next couple of steps after the phrase he said. And what he said was that we're only as good and as strong as the weakest member of our team. So it doesn't matter if 10% of your team are AI native and they've got all the tools and experts and everything. Sorry, 90% know what they're doing. The 10% in the business are going to drag down everybody else. Now, it kind of sounds good as a LinkedIn soundbite, but I think in actual reality, it doesn't actually make any sense. So when we think about the different categories and what and how AI is going to change the future of work, the way people work, processes, automations, becoming more agentic and building more hybrid workforces, you don't need every single person in your business to know how to build an agent. Every single person in your business doesn't need to build an agent. You need domain experts that can design better ways of working, new workflows, new processes, new operating models. You need technical experts that can build those solutions based on strong inputs, strong descriptions, ideal outputs, and measures, and obviously experiment with the thing that's being built. And then you need leadership or sponsorship to now go and help people actually take in that change and work through that change. But for the majority of the people in the organization, and I'm going to simplify this for ease, but they should just walk into the office on Monday and just work in a better environment. There isn't actually anything for them to technically adopt, and the technical part shouldn't become the barrier, because agentic at scale happens behind the scenes. It happens around the worker, not through the worker. And it's that whole thing of, right, it's almost this technical literacy is just a nice excuse to have. And the organizations that don't really know what they're doing can use that as the excuse, and they could say, well, we've run the programs and we've got the LMS and we've got the courses, but unfortunately, we don't have the permissions or the tools or the time to teach everybody how to build. Whereas the organizations that are already reaping the benefits and that are winning are going about it in a very different way. They're not trying to turn everyone into an AI pilled engineer overnight. They're taking a cut of the organization, and they know, right, what skills and what technical ability is needed at what stage, and what does our organization actually need to turn AI into value creation.
Yeah, there's another part of that conversation now. That is that if in the invisible AI kind of example, so this is the agents and automations are happening behind the scenes, and not everybody needs to be a builder. You also have a refactoring of the jobs, though. So you've got people who used to come in and they used to do the things that now the machine is doing, and organizations still need to put in time, effort, trouble, money, either reskill or change roles or whatever that looks like for the people who now 80-90% of their role that they used to do is gone, and they need to figure that out. So there's still an effort needed to manage those things. But you're right, it's not always about technical literacy. It's about other things. If you're watching this, it's about other things. Good.
Key takeaway is any learning department that's still either early in this journey or not getting what they thought they were going to get by the course library or the programs that they booked, just give Ashwin a call and listen to his advice and follow his instructions.
Love it. All right, let's stop the L&D bashing, because we could go on forever.
But, maybe something a little bit interesting. Something I know we've personally discussed and I've shared with you at 3 a.m. via WhatsApp around things that I feel. But again, this is going to become a real thing for the future of work discussions, and people love to talk about things like work-life balance and what that means and why it's important. AI is helping people become far more productive, but now it's so much more difficult to actually stop working.
Yeah.
And it's not just from the sycophantic, always trying to please you, GPT and Claude style of, hey, I can also do A, B, and C. But it's almost like the things that my capabilities and capacity for work used to be at a very different level 3 years ago. There was a very natural point where I would get to the end of my capability or skill in a certain task, and either I'd have to accept that that's good enough and that checks all the boxes I thought it would do, but it's been built within the constraints of my capabilities. Now with AI, and for the last 3 years, that bar keeps decreasing. So there are things that I couldn't even imagine that I could do 3 years ago that I can do fairly easily now. And now that finish line almost keeps going further and further, because as you get closer and closer to the end, you start seeing things that maybe you didn't think of before, new ideas. Does this just need to be a 3D model, or can I actually make this interactive and help people walk around this scenario or this simulation? Do I just need to offer up 10 simulated examples? Or is it just as easy to offer up 200 simulated examples in different languages and different regions and different cultures and different laws and rules? And actually, I can push this out to people globally. So it's almost like, where is that? I know it's a personal thing that I find. I could have stopped working 6 hours ago, but I'm still adding more and more and more and doing more with it because it's so easy to do. Are you feeling any of this? Are you hearing any of this? Do we see any of this leaking into the workplace?
So I do occasionally get people, whether it's on a panel, whether it's at a conference, whether it's at a client side, whether it's just people that I meet networking or people who try to put calls in my diary. I do occasionally get people telling me about the concept of work-life balance. Now, you know me very well. That's not something that I feel is so important, because we all have autonomy. We all self-regulate. We can manage ourselves. If we can't manage ourselves, then to some degree, talking about work-life balance, to me, always sounds like we're putting the blame on something else. And the locus of control is here, right? It's here. If we're unable to self-regulate, and I understand for some people there are external factors. You know, you work for an employer, they tell you what to do. I get it, right? But I think if we're unable to self-regulate, then there is a problem that is nothing to do with AI. The AI side of things, yes, this stuff is addictive because we can do more, we can be more productive, but that requires a particular mindset. Some people are wired to find being productive an attractive thing in their lives. I'm one of those people. You're one of those people. Not everybody is. So I don't think if you're one of those people for whom, you know, being productive isn't your thing, you'd rather go and sit on the beach with your mates or with your family, then sure, you're not going to find the seductive allure of these things in the same way that somebody who focuses on productivity is going to. So there are those things as well. But in the AI market, there's a lot of really low value stuff happening. So, you know, I think you posted on LinkedIn, was it last week, about showing folks how to redraft their emails with Copilot. And I flippantly said to you at the time, if somebody can't string together an email, then they don't deserve to be in the workplace, right? And, you know, there's a kind of draconian view of this. I've written multiple times that performance is distributed. If performance is distributed and we're enabling poor performers to have the illusion of mediocre performance, is that a good thing? Because we've lost our ability to discriminate in terms of performance, which I don't think is a good thing for society or for organizations. We need some way of sorting out the best from the rest. So we can't do that. I don't think work-life balance is necessarily going to help us on that front. But it's not only about work-life balance. So I was, a while ago, maybe two months ago, something like that, I had a friend of mine who was in between jobs, and that friend was saying, you know, they've worked in a company that was a little bit old-fashioned. They didn't really have much in the way of AI. Moving into a new job, it would be nice if that friend knew a little bit about AI. So I said, fine, let's get on a couple of calls and I'll just show you a few things and show you a little bit how I work. And 3 calls was the limit, because 3 calls was, the message I got was, that's overwhelming. It's a lot to take in. It's a massive shift from how a company that was using, let's say, Copilot or something like that was working to the way an agentic business works. The difference is huge, and the difference gets bigger every day. So back to the point on work-life balance and this stuff being addictive and performance being addictive, the gap between enterprise that does the basics such as drafting email and fully agentic organizations like ours, that gap is getting bigger and bigger every day. And at some point, it's not even comprehensible. So work-life balance is one thing, but I think there are other stresses in the market around the ability to self-regulate and the difference in ways of working. And I think these kinds of things stress people out. What do you think?
I agree. Like, even the whole work-life balance thing, it's such an individual thing. And again, I get told that I oversimplify things, but if you don't like what's going on, change the circumstances, just change the thing. If you enjoy what you're doing, then why is it a problem? Why question it? If it's causing you pain, go and try and find a way to ease that. And again, I know I'm being simplistic, but some people have jobs, some people don't have complete freedom the way you and I do. But I don't like societal rules, just kind of the shoulds and the be all and end all kind of being that overarching thing. Now, again, I'm going to be completely honest. For me, I don't see this as a problem. Like, I really enjoy working till silly hours in the morning. I look up and I think, oh no, how the hell is it 3 a.m.? But I've enjoyed that time, and it is very addictive. It's very seductive, and especially when you're multitasking on 3 or 4 different things. Again, and I'm going to use the game changer world here, because 3 years ago, half of the stuff that I'm doing today, I could not do. I used to pay other people or other companies to do some of the stuff that I'm doing now. And I no longer need to do that now. I was talking to someone about this the other day, someone I'm trying to push into working a little bit harder and spending a little bit more time working than just looking for time in the day to relax. But it was, look, every hour that I can spend today, every step that I can take today is literally dragging the future forward. So if something would have taken me a week or 2 weeks to get the feedback loops and deliver the thing and get it out the door and ship it, and if I can do that now in 2 days' time, it's not about the time savings, it's about the value that that's now generated, and then what else it opens me up to do next by getting better and by trying harder. And again, it's that mix almost between, is this good enough or is it perfect? And that's a difficult thing to define, perfection. But it's almost like every increment above, actually, yeah, this is good enough. I could send this, but let me just tweak this. Let me just add this. That's kind of like where I think the moat is coming. And there's been a word being thrown around for the last couple of weeks in the AI world, which is taste. Taste is now the differentiator, right? It's the skill of seeing what looks good, knowing when to stop or knowing when to continue or knowing what else could be done. And some people see this just as perfectionism. But if I know that an object on a screen is 1 pixel lower than another object, it's not about, for me, it's not about whether somebody else can see that difference or somebody else has had that thought. It's more about, I know, and I know how easy that thing is to fix. So why wouldn't I just go and fix the thing?
Yeah, but there's another point which you've made me think about. That is, in the old days, you used to make software or you'd work on a tech project, and you'd have these things called sprints, which were basically 2 weeks to achieve a few criteria and then demo that to a client. And then, the next 2 weeks, you refresh those criteria and you do something else, and you add features, you fix bugs, you patch things, etc., etc. And that cycle now is probably about half an hour, maybe an hour, to do what you used to be able to do in 2 weeks. So if that's the case, and I've done this, my team has done this. I know my team works very hard and they're very capable. So they've done this and I've done this, and this is how we work. And you can build and iterate in half an hour, new features, new bug fixes. You can patch up things, you can do integrations, you can do deployments, you can all of these things that you can do in half an hour, and then you can do your testing and all of this stuff probably in another half an hour. If you can do that, why wouldn't you do that? There's kind of no excuse at this point. So this is partially why there's a little bit of the psychology of addiction in this space. Because yes, I could just put another half an hour in. Maybe I won't go and watch that episode of Rick and Morty or something. Maybe I won't eat at 7. I'll eat at 7:30. I'll just do one more thing, right? So there's a little bit of that. Psychology of addiction is related a little bit to how quickly you can actually achieve things in the modern world.
So it's almost because there are so many feedback loops, because that's what it is, right? It's that reinforcing signal. Because things happen so much quicker, you get the feedback so much quicker, which means that the behavior from that feedback, negative or positive, is so much more reactionary than it used to be. You're not waiting 2 weeks for something to be built or updated. You're not having to wait for a day for somebody else to send you something that you can now do in 30 seconds. And objectively, through natural language, which is the way that we're all building and communicating now, I can just describe what I want to have happen, or I can describe what I want to audit or review or check against or QA. It's become so easy to work at levels that it wasn't possible before. The addiction thing is funny as well, because I was speaking to one of my younger cousins. I used to love gaming. I'd often spend all night playing Call of Duty and Black Ops with a few mates, and you just see the hours disappear. And before you'd know it, you look up from the screen, you can hear the birds squeaking in the morning and daylight's hit, and you're thinking, crap, I've only got 2 hours before I need to get to college. And it's almost feels like that for me. Like I honestly really enjoy the thing, but I hear people complaining about this, or I hear people telling me it's an issue, but I don't really see it as one.
Yeah. And speaking of, I know we didn't necessarily touch on guardrails, but maybe putting boundaries around how much you do or when you go to bed is maybe a good idea. They used to say this in the good old days, right? Every hour, take a break, go look out the window, and stretch your legs and do some stretching and all of this. Health and safety, display screen regulations, and all of this. But I'm sure we all ignore this now because we're all working, buses and, I'm not working on a bus, just to be clear, but we're all working on non-conventional environments. But yeah, slight segue, guardrails, right? I noticed an interesting thing on guardrails, which was nothing to do with AI, but it is to do with gaming. I'm playing a game at the moment called Grounded. I don't know if you've heard of it, but Grounded 2 is out sometime in August the 11th, I think. Shameless plug for the game. It's a pretty good game, but it's kind of a weird game. It's one of those, I don't know, have you played Satisfactory at all?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. Satisfactory is a pretty good game. It's on Steam and it's on the PS5 as well. And it's one of these games where you land on an alien planet with nothing but like a spacesuit and a shovel or something. And you've got to build networks of factories that take raw materials and build the things that you need to. So you got to start with, using a hammer and a chisel to break open a rock and find some iron ore, all the way through to mega factories, right? So it's a building kind of game. And I quite enjoyed that. And this game, Grounded, is a bit like the TV movie, not TV movie, the movie, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids back in the 80s, where you shrink the kids and then they're off in the garden, wading through the grass and battling spiders and things. It's a bit like that, but you've also got the ability to build things and, build a little shelter and a little storage pot and put some food in it. And, over time you get a bigger and bigger empire. And in that game, there's a setting, because there are spiders in the game. You're in the back garden, then there are spiders in the game. And there's a setting that if you're really scared of spiders, you can toggle that setting so the spiders are less scary, or they're smaller, or whatever, right? So there's this guardrail in the game to make the spiders less scary. Now, I don't know what it looks like because I had that setting off because I'm not bothered, right? I want to experience the game. But there's a part of me that's like, at some point I'm just going to turn it all the way up and see how do these spiders become like fluffy, tiny things, right? Because yes, they're big spiders, right? You're a shrunken kid in a backyard and these spiders are massive. I have been killed in that game by wolf spiders more times than I care to say, right? But that was an example of a guardrail in a tech product that I thought, wow, they've thought of that. That's unusual, right? But there it is, segue into the world of gaming.
The opposite.
One
the
on the
opposite
clock.
is though. I used to play Duke Nukem.
Yeah, I remember that.
Do you remember Duke Nukem? And the opposite guardrail in Duke Nukem was, how offensive do you want to make the game? The standard setting went from 0 to 100, and you're talking about it going like we're making scary spiders look less scary. Duke Nukem, the whole game was, how offensive can we make this, and how obscene can we make this? How big do you want people's heads exploding?
Yeah.
How much profanity do you want to hear? Good old days.
The answer is always more. Whenever I see these TV shows on Netflix and all the streaming services, the other ones, Amazon, Now TV, etc., Disney Plus, of course, I'm agnostically naming them all. But whenever I see those TV shows, they show up on the first screen and they've got all of the disclaimers in the top corner, right? This contains offensive language and adult humor and adult themes and all of this stuff. And jokingly, the more of those things are up there, the more likely I am to watch it.
Funnily enough, that's how I filter what I watch on LinkedIn. How many warning labels has it got on it? It's got to have at least 3.
But love it. I'm waiting for the point when I get a warning label slapped on my LinkedIn, but there it is. So what else in the last few minutes, what should we discuss?
I was going to say, privacy's almost resurfacing as a bit of an AI story. So I shared something with you on Instagram or LinkedIn this week, or WhatsApp, and I saw something.
Yeah.
I saw an example of how someone had effectively built something in Meta, the Meta Ray-Ban glasses with a camera on them. There's some kind of AI in there. But he was using this. He started off with a fairly safe example, which was just leveraging Google API for their live translation. So if he was in a room and somebody was speaking Japanese or Arabic, the captions would appear in his Ray-Ban glasses. So people could speak in their native tongues more comfortably and think and communicate the way that they are more comfortable doing. And the other person would just see the translation of that appear in their glasses, on the heads-up display. But then, like, where does it kind of stop? Because that's a sensible, I'm going to say, small example. And yes, it helps humans communicate better and helps us all get along a little bit more. But where does that angle stop? And when does it get to the point where we need to start telling people, I'm wearing a device which is using AI, which is recording and processing and maybe sending off what you look like and how you speak and your appearance and the environment around you off to an AI model that then I can use to process for something else.
Yeah.
If we think about poker players, they're around a poker table. The skill of poker is much about hiding micro reactions to things. What if people start using it around a poker table to spot micro expressions that people don't know they're doing, or subconscious ticks and those kind of things? Like, where does this kind of stop and how far does it go?
Yeah. So on the language translation bit, I've got the Samsung 4 Pro earbuds, but on the 3 Pro earbuds, the previous version, we had this language translation capability. So I've had a conversation with a friend in Italy using these. So I had my phone or did I have the headphones and she had the phone? I can't quite remember, but one person talking Italian, one person talking in English, and the Italian phrase was spoken, the English translation was spoken, my response was spoken in English, and the phone then read out the Italian. So a couple of extra steps, but basically it was a conversation. And we've moved on a little bit to that being in the wearables, the glasses. Now, the other thing I saw on a reel, I can't remember if I sent it to you or not, but was that Meta, obviously the Facebook company, had disabled the glasses if you cover there's a little red light if you're recording on the glasses. And if you cover that or disable that in any way, it'll disable the whole thing. So it'll stop recording, which is an engineering solution to the privacy angle. So effectively, the red light lets people know that you are recording them. Now, in future, I put out a post about this maybe last year on LinkedIn when I noticed that nearly all of my calls had AI note takers just joining without anybody talking about it. Not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a social construct of consent. And how much of the death of consent in society when we have all of these devices and all of the ability to record anywhere and any place, anytime. If we're doing that and that becomes a social norm, then we have the inevitable death of consent, which is potentially problematic. I don't know. The other part that you're talking about is how many companies know what we're doing all the time. And I was at a conference, I don't know, 2013 or something like that, a long time ago. And it was a security conference. And one of those speakers was talking about the concept of, like, if I'm in a public place and I take a selfie of myself, of course, because it's a selfie. But if I take a picture of myself, and there's somebody in the background. Now, even if that person has no social footprint and doesn't take any pictures of themselves, if they're in that park and a bunch of other people are taking selfies and they appear in the background of all of those selfies, you can piece together a surveillance footprint of that person, even though they were not the main subject in anybody's photos. That, to some degree, is countered by the other thing, which is I was in Scotland with a friend and, vacation, she was taking a bunch of selfies of herself in front of iconic Edinburgh buildings or landscapes or whatever it was. And there were other people in those pictures. And then diligently, she was taking all the other people out of these pictures. And you've got both of those things now, competing for digital footprint. So you've got the people who would be captured in the background, and therefore there's an invasion of privacy, versus the people who are now taken out of pictures in some kind of effort to make everybody look like they were alone at these landmarks. So I don't know quite where we're going with this, because it seems to be a mix of different tech that's competing for a nebulous, unknown vision of the future, which may or may not include surveillance. So I think it's a murky time at the moment. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was more about it's obviously it's going to be like a bit of a barbell or like a seesaw approach. Like I can't think of anyone, that I don't know anyone that would object to something like that live translation feature. Like, I don't think anybody will object to that because it doesn't really seem like there's any harm to it. But if people could record people without them knowing, or we're using AI in different ways, or if I could somehow mask the meta glasses, or you didn't even, if there were contact lenses, for example, and you couldn't even tell that I was wearing them, but then this was helping me reply in an interview context or with technical information or whatever it is, like almost where is that line, and are those lines even being considered and drawn societally? Because as hardware and wearables start getting more intelligent with AI and integrations and APIs and everything else, like we're going to be seeing more and more of this, right?
Well, even down to the example you've given, in order to translate, you need to capture the audio. You need to probably audio to text conversion, text translation into a different language, and then translation into audio if that's what you want. In that process, audio is recorded. Is audio deleted at the end? You don't know, right? So even in that process, there is the potential for the kind of privacy invasion that you're talking about. And do we know? Do we consent? Are we well informed enough to know whether or not there is a recording of everything being stored on a server somewhere? I know Meta has just announced that they have 100 billion of spare compute capacity that they're going to sell on the market, which is nice because it helps costs to drop, maybe. But they also have plenty of spare storage capacity. Right? What are they going to use that for? Well, if they're recording everything that everybody does, then they're going to need all of that space. So these things start to move into the realms of not only AI transparency, but also data transparency more broadly, and regulation and all of these things. So I think even in the translation example, we have questions. Anyway,
Nice.
Look at that. Look how the time flies. So yet again, we have put the world to rights while reviewing what the news is telling us this week. We couldn't get to everything, of course, because lots of things are happening and we only have a finite amount of time. Yousaf, thank you once again. I will see you next week, of course.
Yeah, sounds good. No, it's been a pleasure. For any of the 5 people that are listening to this and probably made it to the end, let us know what you want us to cover and what you want us to speak about. What are you seeing in the news? What is being discussed in your circles, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your peers? What's the stuff that you haven't found a good enough answer for? And what's the stuff that we can probably crack a couple of jokes about? Let us know if this is interesting. Let us know if you enjoy it. And we'll hopefully see you back for episode 3.
Absolutely. Follow us on all channels, follow on Spotify, like and subscribe, and smash the bell button, etc. on YouTube. Drop everything in the comments. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, go watch the full episodes, of course. Don't just look at the reels and assume that you've heard everything. Until next time.